Hi, it's so lovely to be here with you all, and I am very excited for tonight's readings. Uh, I want to begin with a familiar question, which feels actually a little nostalgic in these pandemic times. So, you are throwing a dinner party, remember those? And you have room at the table for three people, dead or alive, from any era. Whom do you invite? As so many of you know, writing can be a lonely practice. Yet, in Yona Harvey's brilliant genre-expanding collection, You Don't Have to Go to Mars for Love, published by Four-Way Books and winner of the Believer Book Award, nearly every page is a different iteration of the world's best dinner party. The poems written after and for ancestors like poet Gwendolyn Brooks, civil rights activist Ella Baker, artist Romare Bearden, and African American contemporaries like historian Elizabeth Clark Lewis and musician Erykah Badu, offering a feast of the most beautiful dark that hosts the most private sorrows and feeds the hungriest ghosts. Yona's debut collection, Hemming the Water, won the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, and as a contributor to Marvel Comics' World of Wakanda, as well as Black Panther and the Crew, she was the first Black woman in history to write the storyline of X-Men's Storm. And just as under the power of Yona's pen, Storm paraphrases and pays homage to poets like Sonia Sanchez and Audre Lorde, Yona's poetry draws inspiration from visual art, her poems leaping away from the safety of the left margin to dance, scroll, and waterfall across the page. These are poems restless in their searching for new ways to articulate love and community and loss, delving into past myths before rocketing into possible galactic futures. In her craft talk yesterday, Yona asked, "What is the role of poetry in times of crisis?" And one answer can be found in the title sequence at the center of her book, where she writes, "You don't have to go to Mars for love. For you to be willing is more than enough." And I, for one, am deeply grateful in this time of perpetual crisis for this poet who is not only willing to explore beyond the reaches of the daily world, but who is able to so beautifully share all that she finds. Please join me in welcoming Yona Harvey.
Wow, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I'm going to try to live up to that. Thank you to Miles and everyone, Jennifer, Marcy, all the people who are making this festival go. This festival has been invigorating on so many levels. And thank you too to my awesome workshop. Really brilliant and compassionate poets in there, far more intelligent than me. And thank you to John and Diane. I'm very honored to read with both of you tonight. So I'm gonna read mostly from, probably entirely from You Don't Have to Go to Mars for Love. That I grew up with pickles. I slept in the attic, cigarettes, sheets laced with smoke, the heat of my father's brother's old room. Larry Blackman painted for effect, and Shaka Khan's lips more like a kiss, if a kiss could walk when it came to life. If a kiss could have hips and legs and ass. Well, I wanted that. And if the colors could sweat and strip me down to my slip, well, I wanted that too. Nobody knew what I was thinking up there, though maybe they wanted that. Segregation continuum. After Ella Baker and Glenn Ligon. Layered in black on white canvas, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. Looking at the way we look, looking forward, stepping back by way of upturned neck, by way of 3 steps back, looking black coded, by way of black modes, by way of reconstruction, by way of insurrection, by way of colored fountains, by way of elected Democrats or elected aristocrats. It is obvious we are a presence, though we have been discomforted at school gates, at rental offices, at museum entrances. Even we cannot rest who believe in freedom. We are to some an irritant, an tiresome lot. We do not subscribe just because something comes out of a leader's mouth, out of the mouth of a tyrant. So we are too difficult. We are much too difficult. We are much too aware. We are much too marked. We are all that matter to us that matter. We are the most comforting presence by way of nod, by way of pound, by way of sup. We are always fashionable when we do not try. We do not try to insult except when we do, but we do not hesitate to speak of the things about which we agree or disagree. We participate at the level of our thinking, by way of our thinking, by way of our mass expression. We who believe in freedom cannot rest where once hundreds and even thousands of we ordinary people had taken a position that made us very uncomfortable when we decided, for instance, to walk rather than take the bus. Dream District, January. So one of the lovely participants in the workshop earlier today was asking about sometimes how my poems are constructed. And of course, I like working in nonce forms or creating my own rules for poems. And so some of the next few that I'll read come out of that. The Dream District, January. January, I'm lost inside your industrial gray. My rig at the ready, my trucking, its ginormous tires, flat ironing the road. Vivica Fox's mantra on the CB radio, Black Mambo, more white static and fade. No word from the ladies out there. They know and don't know. They say and don't say January. I'm driving past your peculiar highway sign painted Pasadena. January, you know, I'm nowhere near. Pennsylvania's no California, and getting lost exhausts me. January, I pull the air horn on your fog, pull over at a coffee house that looks like a house I know. But where are the woods, the village, and the goddamn snow? All my guilt and shame on the Mount of books and poems. I ought to know. Now, honey, read this, the Tina Turner look-alike owner says, hands me her copy of an anti-fracking manifesto derived from ancient tea brewing rituals. And by the way, that's all we serve. No coffee at this coffee house. Our specialty is green, Tina says, grown local by the community. All those T's and E's should put me at ease, but my bearings are lost. Where am I? Pasadena, Pennsylvania? Well, make it black and steep it long, I say. The day is wearing down on me. The Sonnet District. There was a fabulous craft talk this morning about sonnets. It was amazing. Diane and Kim Addonizio. And this is, I guess, kind of a sonnet that's gone off the rails. So I have a hard time following directions. The Sonnet District. Stay woke, my ex whispered, easing into boxer shorts and skittering from bed sheets to back door, steeplechasing the furniture in less than 60 seconds. Turns out he'd been working for the Federal Bureau of Invisible Women, and his real name wasn't Tyrone, which I should have known because when was the last time I'd met a Tyrone in the black hole atmosphere of Post and Ish? Turns out I'd been sonambulating most of my adult life with nary a hint of productive suspiciousness. Turns out I'd been wooed by the red wine rhythms of inebriated verse scrawled on napkins and slipped across the close-quartered dinner tables of out-of-the-way restaurants. This I'd confessed to a rapt audience of new polygamists and wayward nuns at the Center for Alternative Shakespeareans and on-again, off-again schizophrenics. How could I explain? I was filled with super celestial longing and addiction to touch. Just the brush of my ex's arm against mine reduced me to speechlessness, to say nothing of his dark ties and fine tailored suits falling to the floor of my bedroom. Things got out of hand when I couldn't leave him without saying goodbye 14 times. The stereo-specific sparkle of my manicure holding his chin steady beneath his closed eyes. How could I have known the FBIW had amended its founding policies and taken to hiring men? How could I have known the slippery slope of sentimentality would land me in a leather straitjacket and kitten heels, smashing discarded cigarettes into interrogation room tile? That string of strangulations in the chauvinist district? My audience leaned in closer then. I can't call it, but you best believe there's a spiritualizing pattern coming into alignment. The dazzling intuition of my female species systematically undermined for the sake of a male leader. Of course, I stole my files to burn later. The guards were distracted by the swing of their own voices, all mistresses' eyes and sun. You best believe I peeped the conveniently placed escape hatch in the shape of a narrow couplet from where I sat. It didn't take a telescope to find that. And The Frog District. The Frog District. I zipped my wetsuit and flopped from the edge of a queen-size bed into the deep, which is to say, I turned in my sleep and swam to the pond where no one recognized me, away from the faithless and careless, toward the skulls of monks who ground their jawbones and moaned. We're born and we die. We swam where you swim. Excuse me, had I needed reminding? More amphibian than queen, more mad than Mary, the after anger of frog work treaded inside me. I had netted fish, I had scrubbed algae, I had shaken the speckled remains of food from lava-colored castles. All you had to do was ask, whispered unlifted fingers, bubble talk. But let me not trouble those waters. My story leaps elsewhere, spider-webbed, emerald-eyed, post-weary. I kick my way back top. Bye-bye, froggy bottom. Keep your convenient book of procedural treasures, your lectures above the well springs, your bit of eerie swampland and half-breed mermaids wrecking toy ships. So I live in the great city of Pittsburgh, and a neighborhood on the north side. And the north side's great. I have a lot of neighborhood pride. And there are the most fabulous brothers who walk around the neighborhood. And we just, Pittsburgh is also a very chatty, stranger chatty city. So just to listen and catch the sounds and the stories, it's just like a great daily existence. So this poem is called Q, and it's in one of those voices. Q. One of the 4 royal stars is watching over me. Yeah, I'm blessed in these times of nervous weather. The leaves chill in a bundle, then scatter like police off to the next doorstep. They don't step. They don't faze me. These jeans could hold 3 men, but it's just one of me, girl. Only sun, only sound, only seer. All this green to gold to red to orange is just theater. I'm the real. Keep your eyes on the navigator of snow and infinite gray. I rock these boots all year. What a storm got to do with me. Who knows the number of strolls to heaven? Not that I'm thinking on it. The heavens know my real name, but you can call me Q, quicker than Q. But anyway, certain things a man keeps to himself. Jesus wept, so I don't. The past is for people who like to play things over and over. Me, I'm on to the next song. Listen to my own head symphony, to the royal stars. The colors, they thrill me. They fuel these legs. And I am going to close with Hush Harbor. Hush Harbor, Charleston, South Carolina. 1. What does it mean to see a Black church burn? Bears Breach, Blue Star, And furthermore, I buried my sister, hushed white roses. And furthermore, I buried my lover. And anyway, he never said, forgive. June yanked yarrow, barren wart creeps. Mary, don't you weep, oh Mary, too. And furthermore, we buried our mother. Bugbane, bee balm, what does it mean to see a Black church burn up Calhoun Street, up Ravenel Bridge, and who among us speaks for us all? Not me. Too simple, too soon to say just what I feel when Black churches 3 burn, the door closing, burn. Furthermore, Black-eyed Susan, and furthermore, we buried our father. June snatched yarrow, hens and chickens, Rosettas between rock, the hell that crept through our door of ages, Jerusalem, sage, lavender, cotton, coreopsis, corners, 4. And furthermore, I buried my grandson, bearded iris. What does it mean when our Black blood turns lamb's ear, Texas sage, false red yucca, swat moths away, sinners in sin? Must we always invite them in? False indigo, gay feather, thrift, must we always invite them in? 5. And furthermore, I buried my anguish, coronation gold in my palms after rain, and furthermore, violets. What does it mean when we memorize psalms, or stand in the way that sinners take, or umbrella sedge, Joe Pye weed, or sparrow over sycamore? 6. Forget me not, Father, forget me not, Mother, forget me not, saints, for you created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And furthermore, I buried my husband, bamboo, goutweed, evening primrose. Mother, don't you weep. Mother, don't. 7. Moan. And plant and lily, widen your shawl, Solomon seal, before you tighten it. Come by here, Lord. Come by here, Lord. What does it mean when our suffering returns? 2-fold, 3-fold, 4-fold, 10. And if they turn, let us shout, saints. What shall we shout when our suffering 8 returns? If they can burn a cross, they can ladies' mantle, burn a church. If they can burn a church, they can burn choral bells. If they can burn choral bells, they can 1 bullet, 2 bullet, 10 bullet, more hushed white roses, baby's breath, prickly hair. I lack nothing. 9. Blood on a church pew like snow in summer, Dutch iris, dead nettle, baby's breath, delphinium, Queen's Anne's lace. I lack nothing. I shall not shovel winter snow. No blood on pews, nor floors, nor stairs at summer's door. Thank you.
Oh, Yona, that was so beautiful. The entire chat was a chorus of I could listen to that forever. So I add my voice. After his debut collection, Up Jump the Boogie was a finalist for both the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the PEN Open Book Award. In an interview for Cave Canem, John Murillo spoke of being inspired by the point guard Isaiah Thomas, that 5'9" scrapper, who even after learning about the death of his sister, and I quote John here, went out the next night and carried his squad on his back. It wasn't that he was able to put all that pain aside. He didn't. He carried all that weight, leaned into the hurt, and still did what he had to do. And in his second collection, Contemporary American Poetry, published by Four Way Books and winner of the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award and North American Book Award, John too does the work that needs to be done, refusing to put pain aside. Maybe memory is all the home you get, he writes in Mercy, Mercy Me, and so shines a light into even the darkest corners of that old house. The strangers left unhelped, the women done wrong, the self-inflicted tragedies only narrowly avoided. Nor does he turn away from the rage and sorrow caused by the murderous racism of our country. In The Heroic Crown, a refusal to mourn the deaths by gunfire of 3 men in Brooklyn, which won the Poetry Society of America's Four Quartets Prize. He instead leans into the pain, for as the judges wrote, this sequence lights a match and holds us in that flame. And in these 15 poems, forget A.B., Petrarchan, Shakespearean, or even Miltonic. John Murillo has made the sonnet his own. These are sonnets that have jumped the tracks and forged new patterns of volta and rhyme. Yet, as we heard in his wonderful craft talk yesterday on sprezzatura, that particular brand of calculated nonchalance in both fashion and poetry, John believes in keeping the focus not on him as the poet, but on the poem. And so it's easy to lose yourself in his writing, noticing only afterward the intricate craft by which you were carried. So please join me in welcoming the Sultan of Sprezzatura, the ambassador of effortless cool, John Murillo.
That was awesome. That was awesome. I see what you mean, Yona. It's hard to follow the introductions and hard to follow Yona's reading. Thank you, Yona. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Jennifer, Miles, Mimi, Susan, Rachel, Marcy. Everyone who's made this week what has been so far. Thank you, Diane, too. I look forward to hearing you read soon. And of course, thank you to my workshop participants. It's only been a few days, but I feel like it's been a full few days and it's gone by really quickly. I want to start with some OPP, so other people's poetry. And this week, we had a birthday. The poet Philip Levine, my greatest teacher of poetry, it's him right here. You guys don't know, it's Phil. On the 10th, he would have been 94 years old. And he was a teacher, a friend, and a mentor. And I want to bring him, his voice, his spirit into the room, into your rooms. So I'm going to begin this poem, this reading by reading his poem, Let Me Begin Again. Let me begin again as a speck of dust caught in the night winds sweeping out to sea. Let me begin this time knowing the world is salt water and dark clouds. The world is grinding and sighing all night, and dawn comes slowly and changes nothing. Let me go back to land after a lifetime of going nowhere. This time, lodged in the feathers of some scavenging gull, white above the black ship that docks and broods upon the oily waters of your harbor. This leaking freighter has brought a hold full of hay forks from Spain, great Jeroboams of dark Algerian wine, and quill pens that can't write English. The sailors have stumbled off toward the bars or the bright houses. The captain closes his log and falls asleep. 1:10:28. Tonight, I shall enter my life after being at sea for ages, quietly in a hospital named for an automobile. The one child of millions of children who has flown alone by the stars above the black wastes of moonless waters that stretched forever. who has turned golden in the full sun of a new day. A tiny wise child who this time will love his life because it is like no other. Well, miss you, Phil. All right, so it's all downhill from here. It's just my poems. If I have time at the end, I'll throw in a Robert Hayden poem for you guys. So I have good news and bad news. The good news is that I'm only going to read 3 poems. The bad news is that I write really long poems. So it's gonna be a minute, so get comfortable. I'll start with the first poem in my last book. It's called On Confessionalism. Not sleepwalking, but waking still with my hand on a gun and the gun in a mouth and the mouth on the face of a man on his knees. Autumn of '89, and I'm standing in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cot, and staring down at this man, then up into the mug of an old woman staring, watering the single sad flower to the left of her stoop, the flower also staring. My engine idling behind me, a slow moaning bass line and the bark of a dead rapper nudging me on, all to say someone's brokenhearted. And this man with the gun in his mouth, this man who, like me, is really little more than a boy, may or may not have something to do with it, may or may not have said a thing or two, betrayed a secret, say, that walked my love away. And why not say it? She adored me, and I, her, more than anyone, anything in life up to then and then still for 2 decades after, and therefore went for broke. Blacked out and woke, having gutted my piggy and pawned all my gold to buy what a homeboy said was a Beretta. Blacked out and woke, my hand on a gun, the gun in a mouth, a man who was really a boy on his knees. And because I loved the girl, I actually paused before I pulled the trigger. Once, twice, 3 times. Then panicked, not just because the gun jammed, but because what if it hadn't? Because who did I almost become there that afternoon in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cot with the sad flowers staring? Because I knew the girl I loved, no matter how this all played out, would never have me back. Day of damaged ammo or grime that clogged the chamber. Day of faulty rods or springs come loose in my fist. Day nobody died. So why not hallelujah, say amen or thank you? My mother sang for years of God, babes, and fools. My father, lymph node masses fading from his x-rays, said surviving one thing means another comes and kills you. He's dead, and so I trust him. Dead, and so I'd wonder years about the work I left undone. Boy on his knees, a man now, risen and likely plotting his long way back to me. Fuck it. I tucked my tool like the movie gangsters do and jumped back in my bucket. Cold enough day to make a young man weep. Afternoon when everything or nothing changed forever. The dead rapper grunted, the bass line faded. My spirits whispered something from the trees. I left, then lost the pistol in a storm drain. somewhere between that life and this. Left the pistol in a storm drain, but never got around to wiping away the prints. This next poem is a bit longer, and I'll try not to say too much by way of introduction, but I'll just say that it has a bleeding title, which is, as some of you may know, most of you maybe, when the title bleeds into the text and it just goes like that. So I'll start the title and just read into the text. It's a long poem, so I hope you will stay with me. Upon reading that Eric Dolphy transcribed even the calls of certain species of birds, I think first of two sparrows I met when walking home late night years ago in another city, not unlike this. The one bird frantic, attacking, I thought the way she swooped down, circled my head and flailed her wings in my face. How she seemed to scream each time I swung, how she dashed back and forth between me and a blood-red Corolla parked near the opposite curb. How, finally, I understood. I spied another bird, also calling, his foot inexplicably caught in the car's closed door, beating his whole bird body against it, trying, it appeared, to bang himself free. And who knows how long he'd been there, flailing. Who knows? He and the other I mistook at first for a bat. They called to me. Something between squawk and chirp, something between song and prayer, to do something, anything. And like any good God, I disappeared. Not indifferent exactly, but with things to do and most likely on my way home from another heartbreak. Call it 1997. And say I'm several thousand miles from home, by which I mean those were the days I made of everyone a love song. By which I mean I was lonely and unrequited. But that's not quite it either. Truth is, I did manage to find a few to love me, but couldn't always love them back. The Rasta law professor, the firefighter's wife, the burlesque dancer whose daughter blackened drawings with M's to mean the sky was full of birds the day her daddy died. I think his widow said he drowned one morning on a fishing trip. Anyway, I'm digressing. But if you asked that night, did I mention it was night? Why I didn't even try to jimmy the lock to spring the sparrow, I couldn't say truthfully that it had anything to do with envy, with wanting a woman to plead as deeply for me as these sparrows did, one for the other. No. I'd have said something instead about the neighborhood itself, the car thief shot a block and a half east the week before, or about the men I came across nights prior, sweat slicked and shirtless, grappling in the middle of the street, the larger one's chest pressed to the back of the smaller, bruised and bleeding both. I know you thought this was about birds, but stay with me. I left them both in the street, the same street where I'd leave the sparrows, the men embracing, and for all one knows, they could have been lovers. The one whispering an old, old tune into the ear of the other, baby, baby, don't leave me this way. I left the men where I'd leave the sparrows and their song. And as I walked away, I heard one of the men call to me, please or help, or brother, or some such. And I didn't break stride, not one bit. It's how I've learned to save myself. Let me try this another way. Call it 1977 and say I'm back west, South Central Los Angeles, my mother and father at it again, but this time in the street, broad daylight, and all the neighbors watching. One, I think his name was Sonny, runs out from his duplex to pull my father off. You see where I'm going with this. My mother crying out, fragile as a sparrow. Sonny fighting my father, fragile as a sparrow. And me, years later, trying to get it all down. As much for you, I'm saying, as for me. Sonny catches a left, lies flat on his back, blood starting to pool, and his own wife wailing, my mother wailing, and traffic backed now half a block, horns, whistles, and soon sirens. 1977, summer, and all the trees full of birds. Hundreds, I swear. And since I'm the one writing it, I'll tell you they were crying, which brings me back to Doty and his transcribing. The jazz man, I think, wanted only to get it down pure, to get it down exact. The animal racking itself against the car's steel door. The animals in the trees reporting. The animals we make of ourselves and one another, flailing, failing. Stay with me now. Days after the dust up, my parents took me to the park, and in this park was a pond. And in this pond were birds, not sparrows, but swans. And my father spread a blanket and brought from a basket some apples and a paring knife. Summertime, my mother wore sunglasses and long sleeves. My father, now sober, cursed himself for leaving the radio. But my mother forgave him and said, as she caressed the back of his hand, that we could just listen to the swans. And we listened, and I watched. Two birds coupling, one beating its wings as it mounted the other. Summer 1977, I listened and watched. When my parents made love late into that night, I covered my ears in the next room, scanning the encyclopedia for swans. It meant nothing to me, then at least. But did you know the collective noun for swans is a lamentation? And is a lamentation not its own species of song? What a woman wails, punch drunk in the street, or what a widow might sing, learning her man was drowned by swans, a lamentation of them. Imagine the capsized boat, the panicked man struck about the eyes, nose, and mouth each time he comes up for air. Imagine the birds coasting away and the water suddenly calm, either trumpet swans or mutes. The dead man's wife running for help, crying to any who listen. A lamentation, and a city busy saving itself. I'm digressing, sure. But did you know that to digress means to stray from the flock? When I left my parents' house, I never looked back, by which I mean I made like a god and disappeared, as when I left the sparrows and the copulating swans, as when someday I'll leave this city, it's every flailing, it's every animal song. That's a long poem. If I could see you, I'd be like, hey, how y'all doing? I see you with my third eye. So I want to know how you're doing. Hope you're doing good. Let me see how I'm doing on time here. Okay. I'm going to read a poem called Dolores Maybe, and that's all we have time for. Thank you guys for listening. And I really look forward to hearing Diane. It's gonna be fun. Okay. I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I slept once in a field beyond the riverbank, a flock of nightjars watching over me. That was the summer a farmer found his daughter hanging in the hayloft and wished for the first time he had not touched her so. I wished I could say we were close, the girl and I mean, but only knew her to wave hello and walked her once halfway up the road before turning finally into my grandmother's yard. This was Ontario, California, 1983, which is to say there was no river, and I wouldn't know a nightjar if it bit me. But the girl was real. And the day they found her, that was real. And the dress she wore, same as on our walk, periwinkle, she called it. I called it blue, blue with bright yellow flowers all over the dress and the flowers. They too were real. And on our walk, I remember we cut through the rail yard and came upon a dead coyote lying near the tracks, a frail and dusty heap of regret. He was companion to no one. Stone still, staring, our shadows stretched long and covering the animal. She told me something I want to say about loneliness, something I've since forgotten, the way I've forgotten, though I can see her face as if she were standing right here, her very name. Let's call her Dolores, from dolor, Spanish for anguish. And whatever the sky, however lovely that afternoon, I remember mostly the wind, how a breeze unraveled what was left of a braid. And when I tried to brush from Dolores's brow a few loose strands, how she flinched, how she ran the rest of the way home, how I never saw her after that, except when they carried her from the barn. Her periwinkle dress, her blue legs and arms, and the fields ablaze with daisies. I spent the rest of that summer in the rail yard with my dead coyote, watching trains loaded and leaving. All summer long, I'd pelt him with stones. All summer long, I'd use the stones to spell the girl's name, Dolores, maybe, in the dirt. All summer long, fire ants crawled over and between each letter, her name, now its own small town. A season of heat and heavy rains washed my coyote to nothing, only teeth and a few stubborn bones that refused finally to go down. Weeks into autumn, someone found the father hanged from the same groaning tie beams, the hayloft black with bottleflies. But that was 1983, Ontario, California, which is to say the bottleflies are dead. So too the ants, and neither field nor barn is where I left it. I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I gathered a handful of my coyote's bones, his teeth, and strung them all on fishing wire, a talisman to ward off anguish, a talisman I held out to you. Now, please come closer. Take this from my hand. Thank you.
Whew. Thank you, John. That was amazing. And you read so many of my favorites from the collection. All right, to our final wonderful reader after an incredible night of poetry. The author of 5 poetry collections, including Still Life with 2 Dead Peacocks and a Girl, which is a great title, which was a finalist for both the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, and Four-Legged Girl, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Diane Seuss is almost impossible to paraphrase, yet eminently quotable. In a poem titled Rhapsody, published just this week in Ninth Letter, she wrote, "I have oppositional poetry disorder. I want to express my opinion about people expressing their opinions." So how could I pick a favorite quote from her most recent collection, Frank Sonnets, out from Grey Wolf Press, when it abounds with lines like, "Labels now slip off me like clothes," or, "The sonnet, like poverty, teaches you what you can do without." In this kind of a memoir, as she told us earlier today, the music of the sonnet seemed an antidote to the plodding of prose, the compression of 14 lines leading to ideas and insights I wouldn't have otherwise had. As readers, we are gifted with 127 new explorations and expansions of the American sonnet. Always 14 lines, yet some are slender and look inward, while others are so propulsive they require a fold-out 2-page spread to contain them. And though her bio includes a Guggenheim Fellowship, as well as the receipt of the John Updike Award from the Academy of American Arts and Letters, as Diane said in her craft talk very memorably, those poets who grow too comfortable in the promised land can become part of the couch. So every bio I've found for her also notes that she was raised by a single mother in the rural Michigan she still calls home, and that she has a master's in not creative writing, but social work. And when it comes to writing, she describes herself as mostly self-taught, offering yet another reminder that there are so many different paths to the page. Yet, trying to tell the uninitiated about a Diane Seuss poem, which are memorable for not just their content and ideas, but for how they fly a reader through space and time and consciousness, is like trying to share the experience of riding a roller coaster by saying, well, so we went up and then we went down. So instead, please sit back, buckle up, and help me welcome the incomparable Diane Seuss.
Man, wow. What an intro, Jessica. Thank you so much. You see me, you know me in a good light. And thank you to all of the people who have made this festival happen. And John and Yona, I'm so honored and humbled by reading in your presence. I'm just bowled over that I'm sitting here and that I got to listen to you today. Okay, so I'm going to read some sonnets from Frank Sonnets, and then I'm going to close with a couple of new poems that are very different in terms of structure, at least. Poetry, the only father, landscape, moon, food. The bowl of clam chowder in Nakata, was I happy? Mountains of oyster shells gleaming silver, poetry the only gold, or is it? My breasts, feet, my hands, index finger, fingernail, hangnail, paper cut, what is divine? I drove to the sea, wandered aimlessly. I stared at my tree. I said in my mind, there's my tree, there's my tree, I said in my mind. I remember myself before words, thrilled at my parents' touch. Open milkweed with no agenda, blue the fluff, no reaching for comparison. To be free of signification, wriggle out of the figurative, itchy sweater, body, breasts, vulva, little cave of the uterus, clit, need, touch, come. I came before I knew what coming was. Iambic pentameter. Did I feel it? Does language eclipse feeling? Does it eclipse the eclipse? There is a certain state of grace that is not loving. Music, Kurt says, is not a language, though people say it is. Even poetry, though built from words, is not a language. The words are the lacy gown. The something else is the bride who can't be factored down even to her flesh and bones. I wore my own white dress, my hair a certain way, and looked into the mirror to get my smile right, and then into my own eyes. It's rare to really look, and saw I was making a fatal mistake. That's the poem. But went through with it anyway. That's the music. Spent years in a graceful detachment. Now silence is my lover. It does not embrace me when I wake, or it does, but its embrace is neutral, like God or Switzerland since 1815. No need to sparkle, Virginia Woolf wrote, in a room of one's own. Oh, would that it were true. I love the kids who didn't. June, can't remember her last name, tilt of her head like an off-brand flower on the wane, her little rotten teeth the color pencil lead, house dresses, even in fourth grade. And that boy, Danny Davis, gray house, horse, eyes, clothes, fingertips, and prints. Freckles, not copper colored, but like metal shavings you could clean up with a magnet. Now, Mrs. LaPointe was a dug up bone, but Miss Edge sparkled, taught the half and half class, third and fourth grades cut down the middle of the room like a sheet cake, wore a lavender chiffon dress with a gauzy cape to school, aquamarine eyeshadow. Sweetie, she whispered to me, leaning down, breath a perfume. Your daddy's dead. Tears stuck to her cheeks like leeches or jewels. I floated, I flew, I fell to earth to learn the pleasures of the lowdown, which meant sometimes going downtown to the Ready Theater to get my ticket punched by old Hook for a hand. I feared ambulances, janitors, knives, dogwood blossoms, my sister's boyfriends, one of whom threw a knife at my head, one of whom pressed his whiskers into my face and whispered things. My girlfriend's boyfriends, one of whom shot me in the bone behind my ear at a shooting gallery. My unspayed dog's periods. We put her in my sister's bikini underpants stuffed with a Kotex pad. The girl whose eyes were crossed, cowboy boots on the wrong feet. The birthmark girl, Dwight who saw through me. Little S hit and killed by a Jeep on 13th Street. The guy who hit him sticking his tongue in my mouth at an adult party. Jesus, the eschaton, which I learned from a well-read Jehovah's Witness was a synonym for the end of the world. My father resurrecting, my father not resurrecting. I feared, floating, flying, falling, the lowdown. So this takes, I don't know that much about the Bible. I know that's hard to believe, but this takes something I read about called the harrowing of hell, when Jesus apparently in some versions of Christianity after the crucifixion went to hell and kind of fucked shit up and then brought some souls back, cleansed. So I took the harrowing of hell, but I brought it to where I'm from. He came to us all the way down here with us. He trod the narrow path to us. He harrowed us. He robbed us of our stuff, and then he bade us to adore the very robber who had robbed us of ourselves. He swept his empty hand across our shelves. He commandeered our dust. He loosed the goats, rejoined the milky mothers to their calves. He cut our drooping fruits in halves, infringed upon our lust. He mesmerized the feral cats and charmed them from the pea-marked corners of the barn into god-awful light. He strode across our ashes and our blight, the fields we'd burned to rid ourselves of parasitic worms and ticks. He snared our seeds and jarred our feeble bees. He gathered up our kids, the ones who squeezed their dirty feet into ill-begotten shoes, the brood of meth and thunderbird, whose amniotic sacs were tinted blue. He harrowed us, unbarrowed us. He sparrowed us and nailed us. Then he jacked our 7-Eleven and he hauled us up to heaven. Okay. Then I moved to New York. I should have been in cinema. I should have been in paint or founded a band. I am certain of nothing, said the tattoo. Where is home? Scratched the chickens. I should have met the Stones when I had the chance, should have let Keith turn me inside out. So what if I ended up dead or crazy? I am big, but this feeling is bigger, the silo whispered. I am a movie screen, drawled the pasture. I should have kept the baby. So what poverty? I could have loved the little fox-faced punk. I am buxom, breathed the prairie. I should have taken the radical path. I should have gone the cheerleader's way. Should have married Chuck before he enlisted. What if I'm a star, said the lamb. A star, said the ham. A star, said the duck. A star, said the truck. A star, said the star. Is this music about sound and not notes? What if it broadcasts a shimmering? Parties among strangers, punks, leather caps and straps pressing quaaludes between my lips. What was pressed in, I swallowed. Is it hard for you to imagine me wearing gold lipstick? I did. Is it hard for you to imagine me stupid? I was passed like bread among strangers. For a couple of nights, I was the new thing, then just a thing. Days I ran a vintage clothing store, sat at a card table with a cigar box for a cash drawer. The place too small for more than a couple of racks of old dresses and tuxedos. Every day, a screenwriter newly arrived from Poland sat across from me, knee to knee, and read from his horrible screenplay. He asked for critique, but when I gave it, he derided me, once even spit in my face. I quit the job to get away from him, or didn't quit, just didn't show up one day. That's how things worked back then. I was valueless, no? It seems strange now when everyone is so intent on having value. I flitted in my stolen vintage clothes, topless. I was that writer named Anonymous. I'm skipping a poem that is about me destroying my leg, falling on ice. But this poem kind of follows it. There is a force that breaks the body, inevitable. The byproduct is pain, unexceptional as a rain gauge, which has become arcane. Rhyme likewise, unless it's assonant or internal injury. Gloom, joy, which is also a dish soap, but not the one that rids seabirds of oil from wrecked tankers, that's dawn, which should change its name to dusk, irony being the flip side of sentimentality here in the Iron Age. Ironing out the kinks in despair, turning it to hairdo from hair, to do, vexing infinitive. Much better to be pain's host, body of Christ as opposed to the Holy Ghost. When I have been suffering at times, I could step away from it by embracing it. A blues thing, a John Donne thing. Divest by wrestling, then sing. So maybe I'll read one more sonnet, and then I'll read a new poem to end. Several of the poems in the book are about my friend and love, Nickole, who died of AIDS in the mid-'80s. And this one is one of the few that poems in the book that are poems of address. I saw a little movie of a person stroking a small bird with 2 Q-tips, one held between the forefinger and thumb of each hand. It tipped back its head to receive the minor tenderness, which to the bird must have felt like being touched by God. For a moment, I knew what it would be to feel at the mercy of love, small scale, the kind shown but not spoken of. I was afraid to touch you. I was afraid of the lesions you described to me over the phone, their locations and the measurement in centimeters of each. Jesus marks, you called them. all so I would be prepared and unafraid or less afraid, but still I was afraid of dying like you were dying. When I first arrived, I looked so long into your eyes, you shivered and ordered me to look away. You were imperious in your dying, yet courtly about my fear. You understood, as if I were a child afraid of lightning storms, which I am, having at age 10 been struck. Out of the blue, you said that once you were dead, I'd never be able to listen to Blue again, Joni Mitchell's Blue, not just the song, but the whole album. It was a minor curse you lay across my shoulders, like a fur dyed blue. And so I listen now in defiance of you. In the listening, the pronoun shifts. We are listening. There is no death. And I'll end with a newer poem called Love Letter. And you'll see this is, a really different kind of poem than those poems in Frank. We have to move on, or so I'm told. Love letter. But what can it be if love is a past tense event? And what was love then, according to my brain? And what is love now? And how do I direct it like a beam with the power to excise all that is not love? For a time, I believed getting and keeping love required lace, procuring lace and arranging it on my body in a certain way. Isn't that funny and/or strange? I modulated my voice to the northern region of its register, reddened my lips. This was love's drapery and music and face. If you've read Madame Bovary, if you've read Gothic romance, you know the denouement of that arc. When I first read the word denouement out loud, my ex-husband laughed at my mispronunciation. I include it here as an illustration of the fact that love does not conquer all. Now, when I think of love, it's like focusing too hard on the mechanisms of blinking or breathing. You can be blinded or suffocated by that degree of self-consciousness. Like a love letter, love seems to me to exist on a thin plane, a disintegrating page covered in words scratched under the surface with purple, disappearing ink cooked up in a chemistry lab. I'm sure I've written a love letter here and there, something gauche, a performance designed toward the specific outcome of eternity. I read of a feral dog who could only be captured by putting the soiled blankets of her puppies in a live trap. This is my metaphor for a love letter. I own a letter my father wrote my mother when they were newly in love. The stationery is smallish and decorated with a garish deep red rose and aching bloom. He spends most of his language's currency bemoaning his bad spelling. No wonder she found him charming. For my people, it is the flaw that counts, but not for all people. Our narrative is an object lesson in the fact that flawed people deserve to be loved, at least for a while. That's the ephemeral part. I'm much too sturdy now to invest in the ephemeral. No, I do not own lace curtains. It's clear we die 100 times before we die. The selves that were gauzy, soft, sweet, capable of throwing themselves away on love died young. They sacrificed themselves to the long haul. Picture girls in white nighties jumping off a cliff into the sea. I want to say, don't mistake this for cynicism. But of course, it is cynicism. Cynicism is a go-to I no longer have the energy to resist. It's like living with a vampire. Finally, just get it over with, bite me. I find it almost offensive to use the word love in relation to people I actually love. The word has jumped off so many cliffs into so many seas. What can it now signify? Shall I use the word affinity, like J.D. Salinger, not a good man, put into the mouths of his child genius characters? I have an affinity for my parents, an affinity for you. I will make sure you are fed and clothed. I will listen to you endlessly. I will protect your privacy, even if it means removing myself from the equation. Do those sound like wedding vows? Are they indiscriminate? Well, then I am indiscriminate. I am married to the world. I've worked it all out in front of you. Isn't that a kind of nakedness? You have called for a love letter. This is a love letter. Okay, thank you.